Hey people, it's NIyas713. I heard about this from one of my followers, so this is from NBC News. He unknowingly had COVID-19. Now his blood contains rare antibodies. The truth is I could come up with no real answers other than perhaps God has a plan for me, said John Hollis. Or maybe I'm just lucky as hell. With his roommate in dire health from the coronavirus last spring, it did not take much for John Hollis to believe he could also contract the highly infectious, deadly disease. He was so concerned about what happened that he penned a letter to his teenage son Davis in case things went downhill fast, Hollis said. It turned out that Hollis unknowingly already had COVID-19 and may have unwittingly infected his roommate. Hollis, the communications manager at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia, learned in July that he fell into a rare category of people whose blood could help scientists understand COVID-19, potentially treat those who fall ill. COVID-19, it seems, cannot harm him, said Dr. Lance Leota, a George Mason University pathologist, a bioengineer who is leading the school's clinical trials on antibodies. Hollis, 54, a former journalist, learned that his blood is fortified with so-called super antibodies, antibodies that neutralize a virus which, even when diluted 10,000 times, still resists COVID-19, Leota said. It's a medical phenomenon found in less than 5% of the population who have contracted the virus, a study indicates, making Hollis and his blood valuable resources in identifying potential treatments for COVID-19. This sounds like Henrietta Lacks. I wonder how much they're going to steal from him. Through John and others, we have been propelled into exciting new science, Leota said. Learning about his antibodies offers us new ways to fight COVID. In short, using Hollis' antibodies, the Y-shaped proteins in blood used by the immune system to identify and fight bacteria and viruses, Leota and his team will, as part of their trials, understand exponentially better how to kill the coronavirus and mass-produce antibodies like John's for the general population to protect it from the virus, like the drug Regeneron, which President Donald Trump took after he announced in early October that he had tested positive. If that sounds crazy to you, imagine how it feels to me, said Hollis, a former sports journalist for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. More than 20 million people in the United States have contracted the deadly virus as vaccines slowly become available. But treatment for the virus is still necessary, which makes Hollis' super antibodies inestimably important. His story began after he took his son Davis on a trip to Europe in early March. Not long after they returned from London and Paris, and just before flights in the United States were grounded, Hollis experienced congestion, which he associated with normal sinus issues that come with the time of year for him. The symptoms passed quickly, but his roommate, who did not want to be named, became devastatingly ill with COVID-19 for a month. Fearing for his friend, Hollis stood by his door early every morning and listened for movement to ensure that he was still alive. Hollis constantly wiped down the townhouse they shared and confined himself to his bedroom. He was scared to death, said Hollis' close friend Kevin W. Tidings, a lawyer in Charlotte, North Carolina. I called him just about every day for 2 weeks checking on him. I was worried for him. He figured he would get it, but to his credit, he manned up and stayed there because he didn't want to go out and give it to someone else. He was especially worried about his son. Hollis said he was petrified that Davis may have contracted COVID-19 on their trip. He was also scared that he could die from the virus and miss seeing his son grow into a man. I was at a strange peace with whatever happened to me, but suddenly was saddened by the prospect of perhaps not living to see my son hit these major life milestones such as graduating from high school, college, and getting married and becoming a father himself. Hollis said, April 8th, I sat down and wrote a letter to my son for him to have if I wasn't here. I wrote the first sentence and I cried. I read it every month and I cried right away. I'm just grateful I didn't have that to give it to him. But Hollis did not fall noticeably ill. In mid-July, he volunteered to participate in a coronavirus study on campus, enthusiastically backed by new George Mason University President Gregory Washington and led by Leota, a former deputy director of the National Institutes of Health. Soon after, Leota called Hollis one night to tell him that he harbored super antibodies. Hollis said he remembered feeling utter shock. Here I was scared for my roommate of fearing that I would contract COVID-19. He said, instead I had it already and likely gave it to him. He got a bad deal. I feel so badly for him, and I can't get it. I'm impervious to it. My antibodies can help modern science. It was a lot to process. George Mason University is one of 13 NIH-sponsored biosafety level 3 biomedical research laboratories that have the facilities to handle live COVID-19 samples. Leota and his team were able to pinpoint when Hollis had the virus. Hollis was relieved that his son did not contract it. He's in excellent health, Hollis said. Since August, Hollis has given blood and saliva samples about every 2 weeks for lab testing and experiments. Leota said that levels of Hollis' antibodies not only have sustained, but they have also proven effective in killing 6 different strains of coronavirus. Leota's team found 7 other people with super antibodies for the clinical trial. Hollis is different from others in that his antibodies maintained at least 90% of their strength 9 months after he had the coronavirus. Most similar antibodies dissipate in 60 and 90 days, Leota said. Furthermore, Leota said Hollis' super antibodies will help in the next phase of the clinical trial, testing in those who have been taking the vaccine to make sure their antibodies have been elevated with the injection. Hang on, let me read that again. Furthermore, Leota said Hollis' super antibodies will help in the next phase of the clinical trial, testing in those who have taken the vaccine to make sure their antibodies have been elevated for the injection. I'm confused. If these antibodies exist, and he has this cell structure that can create this, why is there a need for a vaccine? In fact, why wasn't stuff like this explored before? Or whatever. It's all very exciting, said, and it's all because of our patients like John. Our public health official is excited too. Dr. Pierre Vigilance, an adjunct professor of health policy and management at George Washington University School of Public Health, who is founder and principal at Health Up Strategic Advisors. Vigilance, who led the local emergency response efforts to the H1N1 outbreak in the Washington, D.C. area in 2009, said he understands the excitement. Thinking about a key and a lock, Vigilance said, viruses have a key to our cells. That coronavirus key is the spike protein which can pick the lock and get into our cells. It's very effective at doing that. And antibody is like chewing gum that hardens around the key. The key won't get in the lock, so it prevents viruses from getting in the cells. Super antibodies are more effective at stopping the virus from getting into our cells, he added. About 75% of coronavirus patients have binding antibodies which do not neutralize the virus. Less than 5% of coronavirus patients have the super antibodies, making them super important to replicate and use in therapeutic modality. The fact that so few people make these kinds of antibodies means that it's important to learn how to harvest and how to replicate that. Hollis remains astounded by a discovery, but he still wears a mask and practices social distancing. Oh well, the gravity of the situation has also weighed on him for months. To say his whole surreal experience has been tough to digest in an understatement, he said. Dr. Leota and his team are amazing. On the one hand, I'm entirely grateful and feel blessed beyond measures to still be healthy and somehow have this rare natural protection against a deadly virus that's now killing more than 3,000 Americans a day and adversely affecting everybody, but especially African Americans and others of color. But on the other hand, you need only turn on the TV or glance at the newspaper to see a large swath of death and misery from all around the globe as a result of the virus. It makes me ask, why me? Why have I been spared when so many others weren't? He said he has stayed up late nights since July pondering his experience. The truth is I could come up with no real answers other than because God has a plan for me. He said, maybe I'm just lucky as hell. Either way, I do know that I have long preached to my son that we all share responsibility to make the world a better place than it was when he arrived. Never in a million years could I envision this being how I might help to do just that. Now, there's some things I want to say. Now, obviously, I haven't stated it, but he's a black man. So, is he going to receive any financial compensation? Because if a cure is made, you can trust and believe they will make billions off of it. And what are they going to do with those cells? Because I have no doubt that they're going to use them in some way, in a nefarious way, to kill blacks. That's always what they do when they harvest biological material from any African person on the planet. And what else is there? And the thing is, talking about killing all these African Americans or all these people, the number one killer in America and in a lot of countries is heart disease, but no one thinks of banning fried food and McDonald's and all the other crap that causes heart disease. Anyway, I'm going to leave this article in the description. Please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. If you want to support this channel, leave my GoFundMe in the description. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'll leave it there as well. If you'd like to check out one of my t-shirts, I'll leave it there as well. Peace.